Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Back in 2001, my wife and I were going through a rough patch financially. I had just switched jobs, taking a pay cut to work closer to home so I could spend more time with our 6-year-old son. He was the light of our lives, and seeing him grow up was worth more than any salary. The problem was, Christmas was approaching, and our budget was tighter than ever. Our son had been obsessed with video games since he first played one at his cousin's house. He'd spend hours watching commercials for the PlayStation 2, eyes glued to the screen, pointing out all the cool things he could do with it. We knew that's what he wanted more than anything, but a new console plus games would cost way more than we could afford. That's when my wife had the idea to check eBay. We weren't very tech-savvy back then, but everyone was talking about getting great deals online. After a few days of searching, we found what seemed like the perfect listing: a PlayStation 2 with 12 games for $300. The seller had been on eBay for years, with thousands of positive reviews. Most of their listings were for sports cards, but they occasionally sold video games too. I expressed my concerns to my wife, wondering if the deal seemed too good to be true. She reassured me by pointing out the seller's impressive feedback score and long history since 1998. She also reminded me how much we'd save compared to buying everything new. She was right. It was our entire Christmas budget for our son, but seeing him open that PlayStation 2 on Christmas morning would be worth it. We won the auction and immediately sent the payment. The seller responded quickly with a message thanking us for the purchase. They explained they were out of town until the end of the week but promised to ship it upon their return, congratulating us on winning the auction. A week passed with no updates. We sent another email asking if they'd had a chance to ship the PlayStation 2 yet. The seller apologized for the delay, claiming a family emergency had come up but promising to ship it the next day. Another week went by. Nothing. When we contacted them again, the seller claimed they had shipped it the previous week but had forgotten to send the tracking number, saying they would look for it. That's when reality started sinking in. We'd been scammed. Our son's Christmas present was gone, along with our savings. I was ready to give up, but my wife, she went into full detective mode. She started digging through the seller's history and noticed something odd. While their older reviews were genuine, recent feedback told a different story. People complained about delayed shipments, missing items, and endless excuses. Some eventually got their items or refunds, but it was taking longer each time. Then she found something on Yahoo Auctions. Remember those? The same items from our seller's eBay listings were there under a different username. That username led to a dating profile. And jackpot! The scammer had used the same email address and even posted his photo and address. My wife compiled everything and contacted the police department in his city. The fraud detective was impressed, telling us that while they'd received multiple complaints about this guy, we were the first ones to actually track down his address. He said this was exactly what they needed. The detective drove to the address and found our seller with a garage full of sports cards and electronics. Turns out he'd been running a scheme where he'd use money from new auctions to pay off old buyers he'd scammed, pocketing the difference and getting deeper into debt each time. The investigation revealed he'd scammed people out of over $10,000. The court ordered him to pay everyone back through wage garnishment, plus he got hit with 500 hours of community service and 2 years of probation. They also banned him from selling anything online for 5 years. We got our money back after 3 months, just in time to buy our son a brand new PlayStation 2 for his birthday. The detective told us that the scammer had to spend his community service hours teaching senior citizens about internet safety and how to avoid online scams. The garage sale he was forced to hold to pay back his victims was the talk of the town. Apparently, he had to sell his prized sports card collection for pennies on the dollar, under supervision from his probation officer. My wife says she saw the photos online. He looked absolutely miserable standing there while collectors snatched up his cards for bargain prices. I've been living next door to my aunt and uncle for the past 6 years. They're amazing people who've always been there for me since my parents moved abroad for work. I spend most of my weekends at their place, helping them with house maintenance and just enjoying their company. They're the kind of people who give you their last dollar if you needed it. 4 years ago, they decided to adopt two cats from the local shelter. One was this lazy black furball who barely moved from his favorite window spot, and the other was what my aunt called a free spirit, always exploring, always hungry, and rarely home except for meals and naps. Everything was perfect until that free spirit cat started disappearing for longer periods. The first time it happened, he was gone for a week. We weren't too worried since that's pretty normal for an outdoor cat. But then it happened again and again. Each time he'd come back looking a bit rounder. My aunt started getting concerned, not just about where he was going, but about his increasing weight. After the third disappearance, my aunt bought a cat tracker. Turns out our adventurous friend had been spending his time at a house just a couple blocks away. My uncle decided to handle it diplomatically and went to talk to the couple living there. When my uncle approached them about our cat spending time at their house, they completely denied everything. The woman insisted they had never seen any cat around their property, while her husband backed up her story. My uncle came back looking confused. He told us about their strange denial, but we had literal GPS proof of where the cat was going. Over the next few months, our cat kept getting fatter and fatter. It got so bad that during a routine checkup, the vet expressed serious concern. She explained that our cat had gained an alarming amount of weight and warned us about the risks of diabetes and other serious health issues. When my aunt protested that we'd been careful with his portions, the vet suggested someone else must be feeding him, and feeding him a lot. The situation reached its peak during our annual family barbecue. The entitled couple's daughter showed up uninvited. Apparently, she knew someone who knew my cousin. When she was leaving, she spotted our black cat lounging in the driveway. Without a word to anyone, she just picked him up and drove away. 50 miles away, to be exact. Thank God for the plumbers working on our street that day. They saw the whole thing and told my uncle when he started asking around about the missing cat. My aunt was absolutely shocked when she heard about the theft. When my uncle mentioned that they were claiming it was their lost cat, I couldn't believe it. It turns out they had lost their own cat, a ginger cat, over a year ago. Somehow in their entitled minds, this justified stealing our black cat. My aunt, who usually avoids confrontation like the plague, finally had enough. She contacted a lawyer, and boy, did things get interesting. In court, the entitled couple tried to maintain their story. The woman steadfastly denied ever feeding the cat, and when the judge brought up the GPS data showing the cat at their property, her husband tried to claim the tracking device must be broken. The judge wasn't buying any of it. The entitled couple got slapped with a cease and desist order and had to pay for all the medical bills our cat had racked up due to their overfeeding, including treatment for weight loss and early-stage diabetes. Their daughter got community service at an animal shelter, talk about karma, and was ordered to return our cat immediately. When she brought him back, she put on quite a show for the whole neighborhood. She started ranting about how she and her kids deserved the cat more and how much they loved him. When my aunt suggested they adopt one from a shelter instead, the woman demanded that we should buy them a new cat because her kids were crying. My aunt told her she needed professional help, which only made the woman scream more incoherently. When my aunt asked her to leave the property, she responded by peeling out of our driveway while giving my aunt the finger. My aunt just smiled and waved in response. The community service supervisor at the animal shelter turned out to be my cousin's best friend. She made sure the entitled daughter spent her hours cleaning litter boxes and learning about proper pet care. Last I heard, she's now terrified of cats. Our adventurous cat is back to his normal weight now, though he's a bit more cautious about wandering too far from home. The entitled couple moved away a few months later. Apparently, the neighborhood became too hostile for them after everyone found out what they did. My aunt and uncle installed security cameras around their property, just in case. But these days, the only drama we have is deciding who gets to cuddle with the cats during movie night. My story begins with my aunt's endless obsession over my inheritance. For context, my grandfather had left me a substantial inheritance that would be given to me when I turned 18. My aunt never accepted this and spent years trying to get her hands on it, even attempting to submit forged documents to the court when I was just 9 years old. We had a restraining order against her, but it had expired since we hadn't renewed it, thinking she'd finally given up. On my 18th birthday, we were having a fantastic party. Kids were playing in the backyard, adults were enjoying their drinks, and everything was perfect. I was playing chase with the kids when I heard shouting from inside the house. When I rushed in, I found my aunt and some sketchy-looking lawyer in a cheap suit causing a scene. My aunt was demanding to see me, screaming that I would sign her papers today and that nobody would stop her. My mother, despite her poor health, immediately confronted her, telling her to get out of our house and that she would never be welcome here. My aunt just stood there with the most entitled smirk I'd ever seen. She told my mother to shut up and get out of her way. When my mom didn't move, my aunt slapped her so hard she fell to the ground. That's when I lost it. I punched my aunt square in the face, breaking her nose. Funny enough, this was the second time in her life it got broken. I screamed at her to get out before the cops arrived. They fled, but I followed them outside yelling that if she ever came back, I would kill her. She actually had the nerve to call the police and try to have me arrested for defending my mother. We had to get another restraining order, which the judge signed immediately since he was familiar with my aunt's history of frivolous lawsuits. A few days later, we received notice that she was suing me for assault, theft, deception, and other made-up crimes. She wanted my entire inheritance as compensation for her pain and suffering. In court 2 months later, she spun wild tales about us stalking her and threatening her life. The judge asked if she had any proof of the alleged stalking, which she didn't have. Meanwhile, we had security camera footage of her storming onto our property and several witnesses, including a retired police officer who was at the party. My aunt desperately pointed at me, playing the victim card by telling the judge about how I had threatened to kill her. When the judge questioned me about this, I was honest. I admitted that I had said it, explaining that I was furious because she had just assaulted my mother. I got a small fine and 5 hours of community service, which I completed in one afternoon. The judge threw out her case and warned her about filing frivolous lawsuits again. After court, my aunt and her lawyer approached us in the foyer. The lawyer threatened that if they couldn't get the inheritance, they would keep it tied up in legal procedures until there was nothing left to inherit. Their threats were empty since my lawyer had brilliantly waited to transfer the inheritance to me until after all the legal matters were settled. They tried delay tactics, filed for venue changes, and made up new investigations, but nothing worked. During this time, my mother passed away in her sleep. My aunt actually showed up at my house a few days after the funeral, trying once again to get me to sign over the inheritance. I simply picked up my phone and started loudly pretending to call the police, saying I had 2 trespassers on my property who had a restraining order against them and were refusing to leave. They disappeared faster than cockroaches when the lights come on. But my aunt wasn't done. She tried spreading rumors that I was a pedophile to get me kicked out of town. When that failed, she harassed and bullied the one family member I had shared some of my inheritance with, manipulating them into buying her a house. Even after getting the house, she wanted more, but that family member finally cut her off too. Her latest attempt was claiming ownership of a new house I bought, saying I purchased it with her money. The judge finally had enough and threatened her with serious consequences if she didn't stop the harassment. The entire family has now cut her off completely. Even the entitled ones want nothing to do with her anymore. She still tries to spread rumors about how I stole her inheritance, but nobody believes her. She's become so obsessed that she spends all her time plotting ways to get her money. I heard she was living alone in that house. She manipulated out of my family member, still bitter and plotting her next move. But the courts have made it clear, if she tries anything again, she'll face serious repercussions. The inheritance remains safely in my possession, exactly where my grandfather intended it to be. I've always struggled with my weight. Even as a kid in the 1950s, when most children were running around playing sports and climbing trees, I preferred staying indoors, reading books, and keeping to myself. My mother never minded. She was just happy I was a quiet, well-behaved child. But my size made me an easy target for other kids in the neighborhood. I was about 8 years old when it all started. Our neighborhood was generally peaceful, except for this one kid who lived 3 houses down. He was older than me, probably around 11 or 12, and his father was obsessed with boxing. Everyone knew his dad wanted him to become some famous prize fighter one day. At first, it was just the usual taunting. He'd see me walking home from school and shout insults at me, telling me to try running for once, saying it might help me lose what he called my blubber. I always ignored him and kept walking. That's what my mother taught me to do. But one day, things changed. He came right up to me and started pushing me around. He demanded that I fight him, asking if I was scared. I told him to leave me alone, that I didn't want to fight. That's when he called me chicken and revealed that his dad had said I was perfect for him to practice on, claiming I was big enough to take it. That's when I realized this wasn't just random bullying. His father was actually sending him after me. I later overheard him talking to another kid, bragging about how his dad said he needed a sparring partner and that I was perfect because I was big enough that he wouldn't hurt me too badly and too scared to fight back anyway. I tried telling my parents, but this was the 50s. When they went to talk to his father, he just denied everything. His father dismissed it all, suggesting that maybe I should toughen up instead of hiding behind my mother's skirt. Even when they tried involving the police, nothing happened. The officers just laughed it off and said we should sort it out ourselves. Things got worse after that. The bully got more aggressive, knowing he could get away with it. One day, he caught me walking home from the library. I was carrying some books I'd borrowed when he came up and knocked them out of my hands. He started taunting me again, telling me to fight back, saying his dad said he needed the practice. I begged him to leave me alone, but he just challenged me to make him stop. That's when he punched me in the face so hard that everything went blurry. The hit was so bad that my eyes went cross-eyed, and I had to wear special glasses for weeks afterward. My parents were furious, but still, nothing could be done. But something changed in me that day. All the fear and frustration turned into anger. Pure, burning anger. So the next time he came around looking for a fight, I decided to give him exactly what he wanted. It was a Saturday morning. He found me in my front yard where I was reading. He started with his usual taunts, asking if I was ready to be his punching bag. This time I surprised him by agreeing to fight. His face lit up like it was Christmas morning. He probably thought this would be easy. After all, I was younger and had never fought back before. What he didn't realize was that even though he was older, I was just as tall as him, and I had at least 50 pounds on him. He started to brag about how his dad said I'd be perfect practice, but I didn't let him finish. All those months of anger came pouring out. I knocked him down with one punch and didn't stop. Years of being picked on, being used as his personal punching bag, all the humiliation, it all came out in that moment. By the time I was done, he was missing several of his front teeth and blood was running down his face. He started crying about his teeth and I mockingly asked if he still wanted to practice his boxing. He ran home crying to his father, but this time they didn't come around complaining. I guess his dad finally realized that using some random kid as a punching bag for his son wasn't such a great idea after all, especially when that kid could fight back. The bully never came near me again after that, and in fact, he'd cross the street whenever he saw me coming. His dad's dreams of raising a prize fighter probably died that day too. The bully ended up becoming an accountant. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far that day, but then I remember the cross-eyed glasses, all the humiliation, and how his father deliberately sent him to torment me. They got exactly what they asked for, a real fight. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.